Sorry about that. We'll try again. I didn't have the audio turned on. G'day, my name's Dan. I'm host of Dan's Model Bench, and you've probably seen a few of my videos if you're on the channel. This is my first attempt at doing a live stream. I've never done one before. I've got a new computer set up and new cameras and things and a switcher. It's all very high tech. So there's plenty of things to go wrong, of course, when you introduce IT. But hopefully this will work. So the goal of these live streams is I'm doing a group build, 48-hour group build for Models for Heroes, which is a UK charity that looks at supporting returned servicemen, active servicemen, first responders and others who work in very stressful jobs, see things that perhaps you don't want to see, and they can suffer some mental health challenges from that. And the goal behind this charity is to give those folks access to model kits and tools and help, and give them something they can do that sort of it's relaxing, takes their mind off their troubles, and hopefully helps them feel better about themselves and the world around them. And for many of them, perhaps rediscover a hobby that they once knew as a kid. And so this group build really is just around acknowledging that, and we've got some auctions going, and obviously we can donate money to the charity and things like that. So it's just my little contribution here in Tasmania. So what I might do is just explain to you how these videos will look. They're not going to be edited like my normal videos are, so you're going to see everything, warts and all. When I make mistakes, you're going to see them. When I'm tired and do silly things, you'll see it. I'm aiming to build a complete kit in 48 hours. I'm not sure if I can do that because I've never done that before, but that's the intention. So we'll go as far as we can, and we'll obviously finish the kit anyway, but hopefully get as much done as we can in 48 hours. It's about 9 o'clock here at night, so I'm going to be really focusing tonight on just assembling the model as best I can, and then doing some priming, I think. So these videos are going to be a bit longer than what you're used to, is what I'm trying to say. So you either can put them on the background, or if you're ever curious about model making, or you haven't done it for years and you're wondering how you do it these days with modern kits and all the modern gear we've got, well, hopefully these videos will be useful to you and you might get something from them. So what I thought we might do first is, first of all, have a look at the kit itself, go through and see what I'm going to be building, talk a bit about what are some of the materials I'm going to use, and then we'll just get stuck into actually doing the assembly side of things. So bear with me while I change camera views, and hopefully now, well, you can see a keyboard, but if we zoom out a bit, and I'll move that camera out of the way, that keyboard, we can talk a bit about the kit itself. So for this group build, you can build pretty much any kit you like, but the two kits that have actually been selected, if you like, is the ones that that the organiser said, they'd like to see you build if you want to. You're under no obligation to, but they're just two they've nominated. Was an Airfix 148 scale Spitfire, or a Tamiya 148 scale Sherman tank. And I had a look through my stash, and as luck would have it, as you can see here, I do indeed have an Airfix 148 scale Spitfire kit. This one is from 2015. It's one of the newer kits Airfix have out. So this was, if you like, the new generation of kits. So this would have been done with LiDAR, which is a laser scanner. So they would have scanned a real Spitfire of this particular mark, and then they put that into a computer, and they use computer-aided design tools to actually design the kit. So the benefit of all that is this kit tends to be a little bit more detailed, and hopefully assembles a little bit easier too. As you can see from the box art, this is also a Airfix club kit. So Airfix does have a model club that you can join, and each year they have a special release they do that's sort of for club members. And on this particular year they had the Spitfire in 2 different colour schemes. Now, I wasn't a member of the Airfix club, I haven't been one. So as far as I can work out, I think Airfix did actually made a batch of these kits and had a few left over. And for whatever reason, they found their way out to Australia. And so a few of the local hobby stores in Australia for a short time were selling these kits. And as you can see, I picked mine up for $29 Australian, which for an Airfix kit is actually pretty good. I know in the UK, these are sort of if you like your bread and butter kits, the sort of value for money kits, but in Australia, typically when they get out here, they're quite expensive. So this is actually quite a good price for an Airfix kit. As I was saying, this is a Mark V Spitfire. This is like a, not early war, but sort of mid-war, I guess, aircraft. And we have two colour schemes. We have the sort of mid to late war grey and green colour scheme that sort of replaced the brown and green from the early Spitfires. And we also have a black one, which is a night fighter. I don't think the Spitfire was terribly successful as a night fighter, so I don't think they were used in that role for particularly long, but there was a time when they were, and so we've got those markings. Just looking around the box, there's not much else to say. Skill level 2, whatever that means, so hopefully that means it's relatively easy to do. Let's have a look inside the box and see what we get. It's very hard to do these videos when you don't have any editing and you can't take out all your ums and ahs. So if I'm doing a lot of those, bear with me. So okay, we've got the plastic all in one bag there. I'll come back and look at that. I think where we'll start is with the instructions so we can get a feel for what we've got. And we'll look at the decals in a sec as well. Okay, so on the front cover we've got colour printing, so we can see the two colour schemes there. A bit of information about the aircraft itself. By this stage of the war, Spitfires were fitted with cannons, which certainly would have helped. Cannons sort of required you to get a bit closer to who you're shooting at, but if you could get them in your sights fairly up close and fire a cannon, then almost definitely you were going to knock them out of the sky. That really sort of increased the firepower of the Spitfire quite dramatically. Another thing we'll notice at this stage of the war, we've got what's called a blown hood. Basically the canopy's been redesigned, the canopy framing has been removed where they could, and they've tried to improve the visibility for the pilot to help with their peripheral vision, so that when they're in combat they aren't trying to see around the frame of the aircraft, the canopy frame. Not terribly visible on that, but another feature of this particular version, maybe it's on the back, was the Mark V came with your standard sort of elliptical wings like this night fighter version, but you also got a version with clip wings, which is the one I'm going to be building, and that was basically a result of the, from what I understand, the Focke-Wulf 190, which was the latest and greatest German fighter, had a distinct advantage over these Mark V Spitfires when it came to low altitude speed and their ability to roll in combat. So they did this to try and improve the performance of Spitfire, less drag, and they also improved the roll rate of the aircraft, which in some combat manoeuvres gave it a little bit more of an edge. I believe the downside was it didn't perform as well as if you got up to high altitude, and also it could be a little less stable in straight and level flight, so the pilot had to work a bit harder at the controls. But it was kind of a compromise that they had to do because at that stage of the war the Germans sort of had a one-up on them as far as fighters go. Alright, let's have a look at the instructions themselves. These are fairly atypical Airfix instructions these days. They use this sort of I guess CAD sort of view, if you like, in the instructions. Pretty clear what's going on, which is nice. So we can see it's a fairly atypical kit that we're starting instruction with the cockpit. Being a newer kit, we do have quite a decent amount of detail in this kit, which we're going to have to, so there's a few parts we have to glue together just to make up the assemblies there. We can see the armour behind the pilot. We've still got the padded seat, which is kind of a throwback to the 1930s sort of era fighters, which is kind of cool. We do have our instrument panel in front of us, and we have a decal for that, which is fine for this scale. We sort of build the cockpit as a sub-assembly, and then once it's all put together, then we've got that whole sub-assembly done. So we have to give some thought about how we're going to do that as far as the painting goes, because with the time frame we've got, we can't afford to spend too much time on all these sort of steps. I don't have, in the way of aftermarket parts, anything really except for seat belts for this aircraft, but I've made a decision I'm just going to build this out of the box, keep things simple. And also just to show you what an Airfix kit can look like if you just build it out of the box and you're not going to do anything too fancy with it. So once we've sort of built this cockpit assembly, you can see it's sort of a standalone assembly, and then we add that into the fuselage when we're done. It's a nice way of doing things. It should help with the process of painting and detailing the cockpit. Then we can squeeze the two fuselage halves together. We can add a little bit of the top panels there for the fuselage, and then we're straight on to doing the wings. Being a more modern kit from Airfix, we do also get some nice detail in the wheel wells and things like that. And they've even just made a note there, if you want to put this on a stand, like the old days from the old Airfix kits, if you ever built them as a kid, they used to always come with a stand. I do have actually the stands for this kit, but I'm going to do it with the wheels down, so I'm not going to use the stand in this particular case. Okay, putting a spar in there. Basically, these are all steps to do with the assembly of the actual wing itself. Again, pretty straightforward. Once we've assembled the wing as a separate component, then we can join it to the fuselage, and then we're straight onto the tail, putting the rudder, elevators and ailerons and so on, elevator and rudder together. Then we're on to doing the ailerons, and then we change our focus to some of the smaller detail parts. So we're doing the front air intake, we're doing the cooler, the radiators. I'm not sure what that would be, but I'm guessing that's it looks like a ram air from the look of it. And then we're doing the undercarriage, which you can have either in the up or down position, depending on what you want to do. That's optional, so we'll be doing the one with the undercarriage down. I do like that they also include a little silhouette there to show you how the undercarriage should look if everything's lined up properly. Some aircraft have splayed sort of wheels and undercarriage. Spitfire pretty much doesn't, so that sort of gives you a good idea. And they've even got down here how much of an angle move towards the front of the wing they should be as well, which is nice. Moving on, one features I do like, we have separate exhausts. That makes painting a lot easier, so I'm appreciative of that. We've got our cannons. A lot of modelers would sort of look to putting metal ones in, but honestly I think the plastic in this scale will look fine. Quite a few steps in doing the propeller and the spinner. That's essentially an updated modern version of how Airfix sets things up so you can still spin the propeller after you've assembled everything like you used to with your old Airfix kits, which is pretty cool. We have a gun sight, which is nice. We've got our little, I don't know what that's for. I'm assuming it's navigation, or maybe, yeah, I'm guessing it's navigation. It could be wrong. There's a clear part back there. Radio mast. Then we go ahead and start assembling the canopy, and you can obviously have it open or closed. We'll see how we go. If the detail looks nice, we might leave it open. If it doesn't look too great, we'll do it closed. I normally use paint masks for sort of masking up these canopies so I can spray paint them. I don't have any canopy masks for this one, so we're going to have to do it the old school way and cut some tape up for it, so that should be interesting. Fortunately, there isn't too much to do. And that's it. We have then finished the assembly, he says. It's probably going to be a little bit more work than what I've just described, but you get the idea. Also included in the kit is the paint guide. Obviously for this one in the Night Fighter, it's pretty straightforward, it's black. Now you might be thinking that with that, there's really, you know, this would be the easier one to do, but in all honesty, doing black aircraft is actually really hard work, because if you don't want it just to look all black, you want to sort of show a bit of detail, you've got to paint it in a very dark grey, and it's a very subtle sort of effect that you've got to try and achieve. And it'd be an interesting colour scheme, but it would also be quite challenging with a 48-hour time frame. So believe it or not, I've actually come to the conclusion that this one is probably a little bit easier to do in the time we've got. I could be wrong, but that's my thoughts anyway. This is a fairly atypical mid to late war colour scheme that was used by the RAF, so nothing really exciting about that at this point. Except, of course, we've got this, what they used to call, I think it was camouflage A pattern. This was actually done with paint masks on the real aircraft to speed up the production process and to keep everything consistent. And again, normally I would use a paint mask. I don't have one, so we're going to have to make our own. So I'll explain how I'm going to do that when we get closer to doing the actual final colour scheme. But that's fairly standard sort of colour scheme, so I'm hoping we should be able to get through that reasonably well. So that's the kit instructions and the colours. Just having a quick look at the decals that come with the kit. If you haven't done a kit before, these are actually water soluble, so you put these in water and they'll lift off the backing, and then you slide them onto the model. Airfix back in the day when I was a kid, this was their weakness. They made terrible decals. They were always out of register, so the circles weren't lined up properly and all sort of nonsense. These days, Airfix does a fantastic job on their decals. This is done by an Italian company, I think, called Cartograph. And they're very high quality, really nicely printed. You don't have problems with these things anymore. Airfix really went to town and made sure they got that fixed. So they're going to be really good. I'm very confident about that. Let's talk a bit about the paint that we're going to use on this particular project as well. Just again, if you haven't built a model and you're watching this. So basically there are two types of paints that I use. There's an acrylic paint and there's a lacquer paint. The acrylic paints are like the acrylic paints, similar to what you use for crafts and hobbies, what you would use for even painting your house. Most people use acrylics because they're water soluble. They tend to be a little less nasty as far as what the chemicals involved in them are. So they're a little bit safer to work with and better for your health. Downside to acrylics is they can be a little bit more tricky to mix and to spray, and they have a much longer drying time, and that's really the problem with using them in this particular project. I won't be surprised if I do use acrylic in a couple of small spots, but for most of the painting I'm not going to be using acrylics in this particular build, just because I want to be able to keep moving forward with the painting. So I'm going to be using lacquer paints. Now some modelers love these things, and there's plenty of brands out there of lacquer paint, and I've got quite a few as well, to be fair, and they're good paint. They work well, but you just got to be a little bit more cautious using these. You have to have good ventilation, you need a spray booth, and you need some kind of paint mask to stop the contents of these things getting down into your nose and into your body, because the cumulative effect of this is not good for your health if you do. So when we come to actually spraying these, you'll see my spray booth, and you'll probably hear a lot of noise because I'll have some fans on to exhaust all the fumes from the painting. Primer is not dissimilar to what you would use if you're painting a car or something. Basically what will happen is once we've got the plastic parts assembled, I'm going to paint them with this primer. And this is a primer and micro filler. So basically what it's going to do is hopefully bond to the plastic in a really strong way and give a nice surface for our final paint colours to go over. It also allows me to see if there's any gaps or mistakes I've made in the finish of the model, in case I want to go back and do some sanding and tidying up of the joints. So you may see me put some primer on the model, and then perhaps, depending how I go, you might see me then stop, do a little bit of remedial work, bit of sanding, bit of filling, bit of rescribing, and then I'll apply another coat of this. And when I'm satisfied that the model in its primer looks nice, then I will move on to putting on the final colours for the actual aircraft. So we have a grey primer here, which is the one I expect I'll be using for a lot of the model. I also do have somewhere a black primer as well. There it is. Same brand. If I need to use black, sometimes black can be better as a base colour, depending on what we're doing. You almost have to be a chemist sometimes with these modern paints, because there's so many things you need to know. Anyone who's a spray painter watching this is going to be nodding their head sagely, because they know all about this stuff and they do it every day in their job, but we do it for a hobby. Okay, the main colours that you'll be seeing me using is from Hataka. This is a Polish company, and they make various paint sets for different topics or themes. As you can see here, this is a mid to late war Battle of Britain D-Day sort of era. So D-Day is 1944, this aircraft was 1943. So it was one of the early aircraft to get this particular type of colour scheme. These come in acrylic paints, and they come in lacquers, and they also come in a specific formula for brush painting as well, if you want to do that. This one is a lacquer based formula. So let's have a quick look at the paints themselves. I have used these Hataka type acrylic paints before and been very happy with the finish. So these come in a 17 millilitre dropper bottle, and we've got all the various colours there that we'll need for our Spitfire. The only downside to them, and you can probably see there on camera, you can see they don't, when they've been left alone and haven't been used for a long time, they separate. In other words, the paint needs to be mixed thoroughly. And the downside to that is it's actually a lot of work to get them to mix. Once they're mixed, they stay mixed for a while and you don't have a problem. So I don't know whether I'll do that on camera, or I might save you the annoyance of having to hear that, because what I do is I use one of these things. This is a little paint mixer. This is actually for salons that do nails, like acrylic nails and stuff. They come in paints like these. So basically I put it on there and I tie it down, and then I press that button, and this thing will rotate very fast and mix the paint for us, which is nice, and make a terrible racket while it does it. So that's the reason why we're doing that. G'day Mike, good to see you. Thanks for joining. So that's what we're going to be doing with the acrylic paints. So predominantly Hataka paints for most of it. For the varnish, which I'm going to use for putting the decals on and then sealing them in and doing some weathering, I've decided to go with VMS, which is a, where are they from? I'm going to say Czechoslovakia, but it might, no, they're Poland as well. And I've got a satin and a gloss finish for these guys. So we're going to be using the gloss, and then we'll put the decals on, do a bit of weathering, and then put the satin on and do a little bit more weathering again. This will take a little bit longer to dry than the lacquers, but these are dead easy to use. It's pretty hard to get these wrong. So if I go to all the trouble of getting all the colours right, I don't want to muck up the final steps. So I've gone with these to be on the safe side. So that's basically the game plan. Tonight, my hope is to start building some of the sub-assemblies of the kit. If I get a chance to put some primer on it, then we'll call it a night. And then tomorrow when I'm up in the morning, we'll start looking at painting some of the sub-assemblies and getting that cockpit together and what have you. So I've just got Mike here. You go, Mike. Hit and run, your footy team's on. Yep, fair enough, mate. So no problem. We'll have this recorded up on YouTube so you can catch up with it there. Right. I suppose I should also show you the kit. Would have helped. So let me just open her up. Yes, it's pretty cool. Okay, the Airfix typical packaging, they put the clear parts in a separate bag, and then the rest of these trees are all in one bag. As I said, this kit's from 2015, so it is one of the newer tooled kits, and it's pretty apparent when you look at the actual mouldings themselves. Airfix have come a long way from where they used to be. The detail is all recessed panel lines. It's a little bit heavy compared to some of the other brands out there, but not bad. I think the Hurricane actually is worse than this. By the way, I haven't built this Spitfire kit before, so this will be a brand new kit to me. Another thing we'll notice is Airfix have had a bit of a go at putting some internal detail in as well. We can see there it's got some of the ribbing on the inside of the aircraft. One of the differences between this aircraft and the Hurricane was the Hurricane was sort of still 1930s tech, so it had a lot of fabric and wood, whereas the Spitfire had a stressed metal finish on it, which was the state of the art at the time that the Spitfire came out. Interior detail, as you can see there, if we look at these parts here, is really good. So they should come up well with a little bit of wash or a little bit of airbrushing there. So we'll see what we're going to do when I get what I feel like once we get to that point. Detail's quite nice. There isn't a lot of there's not a lot of riveting shown, but that's fairly atypical these days. We've got the basic parts, they're all there. All the moulds look nice and sharp because this was fairly new at the time I think this kit was released. I don't think the moulds have been around for too long. Wings look lovely. Nice panel line detail there, very sharp. You can see there's the clip wings. So I'm not sure how that works with what we're doing. Do we have to cut a piece? We may have to. So that should be fun. But yeah, and this is probably the part I'm not looking forward to, the air intake under the nose, because it's in two parts and it's always a pain trying to get that to look smooth. Right, mate, we'll see you on the replay. So, yep, propeller's looking nice, one piece. We do have bombs, but I don't think that's applicable to this particular aircraft because it's a search and rescue plane, so we won't have those on it. And the other thing to note is we've also got a pilot. Very few kit manufacturers these days actually include a pilot, but it's actually not a bad. Oh, great! So Mike's just told me in the chat that he bought the Eddard kit with all the details for $6 less. Yeah, thanks for that, Mike. I can't afford to buy more kits. I've got more kits. I've got enough to last me three lifetimes now, so I really can't complain. But anyway, there's all the detail. Looks pretty nice. So I think we should be fine with that. Can't see any problems at all. Looking across at our clear parts. Another area where Airfix has really made giant strides is in the quality of their clear parts, and I'm pleased to say this is no exception. They look really nice. You will notice there's multiple canopies. There'll be a couple of reasons for that. Typically, kit manufacturers today will give you a canopy in the closed position, and they'll give you one in multiple parts for an open one. And the other thing, of course, is these kits can build into several different variants of a Spitfire. So not all these parts will be applicable for the particular kit that we're building. So when we get to do the canopy, we'll have to very carefully note the part numbers that we need so that we're using the right ones. And again, if you haven't done a kit before, I don't know if it's coming in and show up on camera. It's probably not the best part to try and show you actually, but we'll try. Put that in there a little bit. No, it's too hard to see. Let me get another piece. It's a bit easier to see. There we go. So if you have a look there, you can actually see there are part numbers. So when we go through the instructions, we're just matching the part number with what we see in the instructions. And that way we know we're going to be building the correct version of the Spitfire. So it's something you have to keep an eye out if you haven't done one of these before. Okay. A couple other paints too, just while I think of it, we might be using for some bits. There's going to be these SMS metallics. These are Australian brand paint. Quite a nice paint. Not maybe my favourite. I don't know if that's a crime to say that because they're made in Australia. I kind of like the Outlaw paint more than these, but they're fine. And I'm going to be using a couple of their metal ones. So I've got a silver and aluminium there. Silver probably for the undercarriage, aluminium for inside the fuselage. There's the plan. Now you may hear some audio going on while I'm doing this build, and that's because there is an auction going on in support of the charity. So I'm going to just have that running in the background for a little bit while I'm doing the build. So you might see that. Don't let that worry you too much. And as I go through the build, I'll try and remember to talk and tell you a little bit about what I'm thinking and where I'm going with the kit. So what I'm hoping with this format, because it's going to be a longer format, is if you haven't done a model kit for a long time, or you've never done one but you're thinking about what would the hobby be like, then hopefully this will be useful to you and you'll get something from it, and you can fast forward through the bits where I'm taking too long or I'm boring you or whatever. No problem at all. I'm not going to be offended, obviously, because I don't know. And I'll just take you through my build process as well, so how I normally sort of think through the process and what I'm going to be doing next and all that sort of fun stuff as well. So I'm just pulling up the hoping I'm pulling up. Where is it? There we go. So yeah, I'm just going to pull up the auction in the background while we're working so I can see how things are going. sec, I'm just logging into the other computer. It's always fun. Draw another way. Cool, we're in. Okay. Righto, so first things first. So we've got some detail parts here that go on the sidewall of the fuselage, but what I'm wondering is whether they actually are different colours. And if they are, it may be easier to paint those. Sorry, I've made a frame here. These parts here, it might be easier to paint some of these parts separately and then glue them onto the side afterwards. You'll also notice there's two shades there, so I'm thinking that's the interior green, that's going to be the aluminium finish. I'm almost certain that will be the case. Looking at the seat, we can see that we have a seat cushion or a seat pad on the back, so I'm going to have to, that will be leather, usually a brown leather, sometimes black I think on Spitfires. So I'm going to have to sort of simulate a leather effect. That will be easier to do while those two side pieces of the seat are not attached. So again, I think they're probably going to have to be done as sub-assemblies. And obviously if we're doing that, that means that effectively is going to be a sub-assembly as well. This part here's 5. I think we can probably put that all together. There's just one part here, it's a different colour, so that's not too bad. Looking at the front here, this was a fairly common thing with a lot of fighters, and particularly with the English fighters. They don't really have a cockpit floor, so the pilot's kind of suspended with this piece behind them that's around the fuselage, and then they've got the pedals, the rudder pedals, and somewhere to rest their feet is kind of suspended as well. So they actually have a fuel tank typically underneath them. So they're just sort of propped up above it. So we've got some parts here. It looks like we could put those together and then paint it. And then we've got the actual cockpit instrument panel there. So that's going to have to be painted a different colour. Presumably black, but I will check because I think they may also have used green background on them. I'll have to check that. And then all these things are then thrown back into the cockpit. So we're going to have to do some sub-assemblies here, I think, for the sake of making this easier. Now I've got some paint numbers here too from look at things, so I'm just going to see if I'm right about that. Where's my paints colours? We would have some paint colours somewhere. There we go. So we've got a number 50 something, 5633. Are they paints? Yes, they are. That's matte black. 85. What the heck is 85? Don't know. That's interesting. I'm sure they look like oxygen bottles, so I'm pretty sure they would be painted some other colour. 56, but they haven't got it listed. So that's not helping. Okay, so we're off to a flying start. First problem, what is 56? Let's see if we can figure that out, because that's going to be useful to know. So let's go to that's telling us that we can glue that on there and then paint that whole sub-assembly. That's going to be black. That's going to be something else. C13, I'm not even sure what, 85. Again, I'm not sure what 85 is. Let's just have a quick look at what 85 is. Black. Okay, so I think what we'll do is, there's only a few small parts here. We're just going to glue all those into those panels. Then we'll go ahead, put primer on them, and then we'll pick out those details with a brush. I think would be easier. Okay, so let's get started on doing steps 1 and 2. So off camera here, I'm just organising all the parts so they're a bit easier to get to. So I typically leave them in the box until I need them. And I don't remove parts until I'm ready to either paint them or glue them onto something or do something with them, just so I don't lose them. So the first bits we're looking for is B1 and B2. Let's go here. Let me just change the camera in a bit for you. Have a look in there. You can see this is there's 1 and 2, and if we look at the top, it says sprue B. So they're the parts that we need. To remove those, you can, if you haven't got anything else, you could use some pliers or some scissors if you don't mind getting them a little bit blunt. I've actually got these, which is the Tamiya nippers. I've also got the God Hand nippers, which means I've got more money in a sense because they're really expensive. They're very fine ones. But basically, they're just like pliers. They're flat on one side, which makes them easy for cutting. And then I just go ahead and cut away. So I want part, what do I want? B1. So I want this first one here. Now, some people would suggest you should wash the parts in soapy water before you start, just to remove any of the oils that are used as part of the injection moulding process to release they're called release agents that actually release these parts from the mould. And I think that's not a silly idea. I just don't have the time to do it. So I'm going to show you a trick later on about how I'm going to do the outside of the model to hopefully avoid any potential problems. Now I've got the part, and you can see where I've cut it. It's not too bad actually, but what I've got is these sanding sticks. If you haven't got a sanding stick, you can just use the ones like you use for, ladies use often for doing their nails and things. They'll work fine. Essentially it's the same thing, and you can get them at different grits. This is a reasonably fine one, and that's all I'm going to need with this kit in all likelihood, because Airfix, the plastic Airfix uses is a little bit soft, so you don't have to sand very hard to remove any edges to things at all. You can see here I'm just very lightly coating it and it's done. So that's part 1 finished. Put that over there so you can see it. And now I'm going to go ahead and find these other 3 parts that we need. And they're on the C sprue. Go ahead and find that somewhere. Let's D. Okay, so we should have an oxygen bottles here somewhere, which is part, what, 56. There they are. You can see they look quite nice. And they're quite a fine detail too, which is the other thing that's happened. Again, if you haven't done a kit for a few years, the moulding process has got better over the years, so they're actually able to put better detail in the kits, and it doesn't cost too much money for them to do it. So even relatively mainstream sort of low cost kits like the Airfix ones, if they're a new tool, are actually reasonably well detailed, particularly for this scale. Okay, again, I've just got a very fine file there. That's that. What else we want? C28. So what I typically do is I'll cut out these pieces. Sorry, I keep going off camera. I'll cut out these pieces first because there's only 3 of them. I'll sand them, make sure they're okay, and then I'll then start thinking about the gluing. I don't cut them out until I'm pretty much ready to start gluing them straight away or paint them straight away, because as you can see with this part here, for example, they're quite small and it's very, very easy for them to fall off the bench onto the carpet and never be found again until 12 months later when you're doing another kit and you're down on the carpet trying to find the part for that. Don't ask me how I know. And what's the last one? We've got C13. First impressions of this kit, by the way, are pretty positive. I'm quite pleased with the level of detail in it. Not too bad at all. There was a time there I used to sort of avoid Airfix kits in the 90s because they had so many of their kits with their older kits, and you know, they were fine for the 1950s and 1960s, but even the 70s are okay. But by the time we were getting into the 90s, we had more choices in Australia, like Hasegawa, Fujimi, Tamiya, all these Japanese brands, and they were just they were quite a bit ahead of Airfix at that point as far as the detail. I think it's safe to say Airfix is sort of, I don't know if they're caught up, but they're certainly competitive. There's nothing wrong with their kits at all. Alright, now for actually putting the parts on, if they're very fine like they are here, I'm going to be using these tweezers to help us hold the parts, and then you might be wondering what glue I'm going to use. If you're an old school modeler, haven't been in the hobby for years, you probably remember the tube cement that we used to have. I don't even own a tube cement. Well, no, I tell a lie. I've probably got one sitting in a box somewhere from a kit, but I don't use it. Instead, what I use is, let's pick another one. There we go. I use these sorts of glues. So these are a bottle glue. They're just a very thin liquid. When you take it out, you have a brush applicator on the end. You can brush it on where you want it, then stick the pieces together, or you can put the two pieces together and then run the glue around it. And it does a fancy thing called capillary action, which means basically the glue runs around the joint, leaks into the joint a little bit, and then seals everything in place. Because I like to make my life complicated, I put them in these things here, by the way, just so they don't spill. I actually have various types. I've got the Mr. Cement SP, which is a faster glue, and it's good for sticking things really quickly. I've got the Mr. Cement S, which is your standard type of thin glue. I have another brand called VMS, which is that Polish company, and their fast glue, which I'm very fond of. It's kind of not as strong as this one, but glues faster than the other one I showed you. And then just for good measure, because you can never have too many glues, I've also got this one, which is Avomig's extra thin cement. This is a Spanish company. And this one's really nice because it glues really quickly as well, although it smells really bad. Fortunately, you don't have to deal with that, but it has a very fine applicator, as you can see there. So if I'm doing very fine detail work, I find this one works really nicely. So I just tend to move between those brands depending on the type of work I'm doing. But not necessarily any rhyme or reason, but that's kind of what the thinking is behind it. We can see here also that this part has a raised dot here, and we have a hole there for it, so you can tell where it's, so you can sort of locate the part. Because this is going to be fairly easy to put together. Oh, I did have one more glue to show you too, because you can't have too many glues, as I said. And this is my other glue. It's Tamiya Cement, this is actually the first sort of liquid glue that I ever saw. This was very popular in Australia. Goodness knows how many bottles they sold of this in the 90s. Same idea, but you can see it's a much bigger brush and a much thicker glue. The advantage of this glue is it doesn't dry as fast. So it's really good for things like wings when you're joining large pieces of plastic together. The downside is, apart from the smell is quite strong, is that it's not as good, it's not as easy to use for delicate parts, for small parts like what we're doing now. You can use it, and we did for years, but we've all got too fancy now with these modern glues, and we use all these other glues instead. So let's start the build process. I'm going to use a bit of VMS here. So I'm just going to wet that part there, and obviously we've got our piece here. There we go. And we've got a few moments just to line things up, make sure it looks okay. I don't know why I can't put things in frame tonight. There you go. And that part's done. Next up we'll do this wheel. We can see there's a hole there for it. So same idea. I'm just going to put a little bit there. I think we'll use the tweezers to help with this one. And drop it in part. If you haven't done a model kit, you'll be chasing it around for a little while till you get it to fit in the hole. That's just a matter of a little bit more experience and it comes easier to do. Okay, now we've got the throttle quadrant. And I'm not quite sure where that's going, if I'm honest. It has to be going somewhere. Is it going? Oh, maybe it is going there. So what I'm going to do now is what's called a dry fit. Because I'm not 100% sure I've got it in the right spot. I'm just going to put it where I think it should go without any glue first, just to see if it fits and if it looks right. And if it does, I'm thinking it goes there. Yep, it goes there. So I'm just looking back at the instructions, that's why I was pausing. Again, just a dab of glue there. I need a little bit more there. There we go. And then hopefully we can get this to fit into place. Like so. Okay, so if we compare our instructions, that's step 1, and that's the completed part for step 1. As easy as that. So now you can probably guess what I'm going to do next. Step 2. Same thing, we'll put these smaller detail parts on and then I will prime them, paint them and do the detail bits, I think. Back to our sub-assembly. I'm trying to find where the part is. Hey Jim Bob from Somerset, Tassie. Mate, you're not that far away from me. G'day, welcome to the live stream. So you do models? Or you just thought you'd watch? Coffee's gone cold. Working too hard. Just recording the video, Jim, just as a case as anyone watches this later and hasn't done models before. And just curious about them. I thought I might as well just sort of talk through what I'm doing as I do it. It's a bit more detailed than what I normally do. But why not? Keep myself amused, maybe help keep myself awake a bit. 35. So what I'm going to do here is switch over to these clippers. Working 1/35 scale, so you're doing the armoured stuff. Do a bit of that as well. So, but I thought Spitfire was a good choice given the charity I'm doing it with, and the 48-hour build. So these nippers are a little bit finer, so they're easier to cut small parts with, but they are ridiculously expensive. It's painful. I actually was in Japan last year and I tried to buy these there because I thought I'll save some money. I saved a lot of money on kits. I did not save any money on the nippers. They are still really expensive over there as well because they're really popular for the Gundam kits, for the robots and stuff like that from the anime shows. So that hobby over there is huge, and I don't think they're in any hurry to do those sorts of things cheap because they don't have to. Okay. So they're actually quite nicely detailed for 1/48 scale. It's got to be said. That looks really nice. So a little bit of weathering, that should come up nice. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead here, and I'm going to come back to step 3 and 4. So I'm going to do step 5, which is the back sort of, what's the term I'm thinking for? It'll come to me in a minute. But anyway, this sort of back sort of framework for the fuselage, which has got the armour and the padding there for the headrest, and the bracket there to hold the seat in place. I think we'll do that next. I'm just trying to find ways to speed up the painting process a bit here by getting some sub-assemblies ready. And we're looking for various parts. So we'll go back to C for a start, C23. So Jim, what sort of armour do you like doing? You got any particular favourites? Do you like doing the German, the American, Italian, Japanese? What sort of, any topics, or you just build anything? There we go. Headrest. Plastic in these kits is so soft, it just takes so little time. You're just got to be so careful, because some other brands, the plastic's a lot harder and it takes more work. And if you get a bit overzealous with the Airfix kits, you end up sanding away things you did not want to do. Alright, C50. This is not a bad kit, but it has got fairly large gates, which is to say some of the parts you do have to be a bit careful with cutting them. I've also got, probably a good time to show that, a sponge. This is a sanding sponge rather than a sanding stick. That's got like a hard cardboard back. This actually bends a little bit, so when you're doing parts that are on a curve, it actually helps keep everything where you want it to be. Being very careful here, because I don't want to remove detail that I shouldn't. That's alright, and I'll deal with it. And seat frame, C40. I'm doing alright keeping it in camera, I suppose. That's something. I'm usually pretty useless at that. Okay, so sorry, I'm just setting up something on my computer here because it's whoops, I lost my chat. Oh, there it is. Okay. So for a hobby knife, you can get some cheaper ones to get yourself started. This is the one I prefer. This is from Tamiya. It's actually a rebranded one. The brand is Olfa, O-L-F-A. So it's actually Japanese company as well, and Tamiya just rebrand them. So you can get them on eBay under the original brand, sometimes a little bit cheaper. I think they're, instead of being black plastic, I think they're like an orange or a yellowy sort of plastic colour. I did see them in the hobby shops in Japan. Exactly the same knife. It's just Tamiya's rebranded it. And the Tamiya ones tend to be a little bit easier to find outside of Japan, I think, for most people. It's a really nice knife. The other reason I like them, I can find the blades for them. The other reason I like these, particularly because these knives aren't quite sharp as that you'd expect to be. I just like the little case they come in, because what you can do is when you're ready to put a new fresh blade in, you slide it like that. There's your new blades. You take one of those out, but it also has a little slot here, and you can just, you know, loosen this up by twisting it, remove that, and then you can pop that in there, and that makes sure the used blade is disposed of safely, both for you, but also when you go to throw away the pack after you've used all the blades, and you throw that in the rubbish or whatever, you're not going to cut someone's feet or hands or something when, you know, when they're handling the rubbish, which is good as well. So I think they're a good idea. I've kind of got used to the blade now so much that I can't work with the cheaper sort of normal hobby knife blades anymore. Okay, so I'm missing a part, which is D1, so we're off to another sprue. Okay, so we're on C. Some kit manufacturers are worse than others at switching you around the different sprues. I'm doing an ICM kit at the moment. It's a very nice kit, but it drives me insane because I'm constantly looking for one part of each sprue, which gets a little bit tiresome, if I'm honest. So that's D1, yep. If I cut this part right with these fine nippers, like that, basically you don't have to sand them. Okay. I'm going to see what the detail looks like. Okay. This is where it gets a bit tricky if you're really concerned about these things. I'll show you what I'm looking at. We have a look here. This is the step I'm doing. And you can see this piece glues onto the back of the frame here. That's all good. But this piece is not actually, it's actually different. It's got a different top and bottom. And the angle they've actually drawn this at makes it a bit tricky to see what way around it's supposed to go. Now some of the Japanese manufacturers will actually key this in such a way that you can only put it in one way. But Airfix hasn't done that. Most European manufacturers don't. So you either have to go and find a picture, or if you look at this very carefully, I think you can tell it's a cylindrical at the top. So I'm taking a guess that's the way around it should be. But you can get easily caught out with that. It probably wouldn't matter with this part in this particular kit. I think it's not going to make any difference. But sometimes in kits, when you get them around the wrong way, of course, and then you go to the next step and you realise that they won't fit now because you put the last part in the wrong way around. So that can be exciting. Okay, that's that. The other thing you probably notice is this glue dries pretty quick, so I'm not having to muck around too much waiting for glue, which is good. So when you work on Just World War II, I'm working on a space shuttle. Oh, yeah, I picked up one of those. But it's a Rebel. Oh, so you got lots of work ahead of you. Yep, party again. Yes, that's, I think, a 1990s kit, I think, from memory. I did build it once, if it's the one I'm thinking of. It came, I had it in two kits. I had it with the boosters, and then I had it with the 747 as the first shuttle, the Enterprise. I actually got to see the Enterprise. I sound like I'm trying to do a travelogue, but it just, when I retired last year, I did a really big round the world trip, and being a nerd about military history and science and space and that sort of stuff, I went to a lot of museums, and I actually saw the Enterprise, the original shuttle that they did, and the thing that shocked me about it when I saw it in real life was just how bloody big it is. It is enormous. It's huge. And you think, how the heck did they get something this big with a satellite stuck in the back of it into space? I mean, I didn't get to see the actual rockets and stuff they used, unfortunately. Would have been fun to see them, but that wasn't on our trip. But yeah, the shuttle, when you see it and you're standing underneath it, which is what I was doing, it's actually a very impressive vehicle. Very impressive. I think that was probably peak NASA, basically. Okay. Alrighty, so we've now got 3 sub-assemblies done. Those 2 and the frame. Can we do another one? I think we can. So I think what we'll have a go at doing next is this bit. Now, obviously, if you haven't done a lot of kits, you're probably better to follow in order so you don't get yourself muddled up. I think I've done enough kits so I can sort of work out a sequence and hopefully not muck anything up too much. So I've got this part here, which is the rudder pedals and the base of the seat, or what supports the seat, I should say. And I've also got this part here. So I think I can probably do those as sub-assemblies as well. So we'll have a crack at those and see how we go. So the actual, it is too. That's the actual instrument panel. Okay. Probably need to find ones for this. Try not to use the fine ones all the time because they are, as I said, ridiculously expensive. So I don't want to get them blunt by using them on things that are too thick. So I'm sort of very selective about what I use them on. So this has got raised detail for the instruments, which is fine. It's fairly atypical of Airfix kits. The decal's okay, it's not great. So it's probably where a lot of modelers will kind of get some photo etch or some other resin or some other detail parts, maybe 3D printed decals, which I've been playing with lately on the ICM kit. They're pretty cool, but they're very expensive. That's the main problem I've got with them. What I'm looking for. So you're hearing lots of banging off camera. It's me looking for the parts that I'm looking for. So B12. Again, that plastic is just so soft. And this is a very warm sanding pad I'm using, and it's taking nothing to clean it off. What have we got? So we need another part, C4. C4. Yeah, no, I consider myself. Jim's just said it would have been awesome to see the shuttle, and he's saying he's definitely jealous of my fortune to see it. Yeah, mate. It was one of those sort of trips of a lifetime thing. So because I was retiring, so we had a little bit of money put aside, and we thought, nah, I'm going to go for it. I went over to the UK and caught up with some family, and then went to France and did the same. Some family over there, and then. Well, we popped over to Belgium, I think, for a little bit. Then we went over to the US for a bit, and that was pretty much all just museums and things like that. And then back via Japan, which was great. In fact, my family, you can't see on camera, but I'm now looking for a part on the floor. So yes, I've managed to lose a part already, which is pretty awesome. Oh, look at that, I found some Toyses. yeah, it was a really good trip, and yeah, one of those once in a lifetime things that you do. And I took my 2 adult sons with me and my wife obviously, and bored my 2 sons at times. My youngest son's got similar interests to me, but my older son hasn't. He doesn't mind museums and stuff, but he's seen a couple of them, that's enough. But I sort of totally geeked out as much as I could because I knew I wasn't going to get the chance to do it again. And so where did we see the shuttle? I saw it on the hangar bay of what was the ship? USS. Not sure which ship it was now. It's the one that's in dry dock in New York, and it's just crammed full of different exhibits, and they actually have a whole section put aside just for the shuttle. And it's actually quite interesting because they talk a bit about the testing. So there's actually some parts, there's some panels missing off the Enterprise, and they were by this point the Enterprise was already a museum piece, and they'd finished using it for their flight testing and stuff, and the shuttles were actually in service, but they went back and took some panels off it because they were trying to work out what happened with the Challenger, and so they had some theories about the tiles and things like that. So they actually took some parts off it to do some destructive testing to see if they could replicate what they thought had happened. So it still served a purpose, even in retirement. It was still doing something to help, which I thought was nice. There we go. Just put a bit of glue around the outside of that one. That capillary action I was talking about before. This VMS fast glue is great for this sort of work. Oh yeah, that's the compass. Very cool. Okay, whatever that was. So you've got the compass, and then this is obviously the instrument panel that's going to be popping on there. So just wax some glue on there. And there we go. There's the compass and instrument panel done. On to the next. A little bit of flash on that, so a little bit of that shouldn't be there. So this is a chance to introduce another tool. Love this thing. This is a scraping tool. It's got like a fiberglass end on it rather than a metal blade. It's really good for figures. If you do miniatures or you do figures of pilots and crew, or crew for your tanks and stuff like that, really nice to get rid of those seams that you get on the figures when you glue all the parts together on their legs and whatever. It works well. Okay, that's that sub-assembly done. Now we're going to move on to doing the rudder pedals. And I think at that point, I'm just looking at the other page to see what else we've got to do. Yeah, I think at that point we might cut a couple of extra pieces out and then head over to the spray booth and get some painting done. I have got a camera on my spray booth, so you can actually see what I'm doing there when I'm painting this thing as well. As I said, I'll be a bit noisy because I've got to run the fans and stuff, particularly if I'm not going to be wearing a mask, but you should still be able to see what I'm doing. So yeah, there's some interesting planes there, and they had a recreation of one of the battles that the aircraft carrier was involved in, and so they had people doing the voiceover, and you sat on the flight deck and they had this light show and smoke and stuff, and they were taking you through the actual it was an attack on the ship. It was a kamikaze attack on it, so you actually heard the sirens going and the bells and everything and the flak guns starting up and the crew's being told what to do and what sort of stuff. They lost quite a few of the crew, one of the attacks, so it's sort of at the end of it they sort of paid their regards to the crew that were lost on that day. She lost a few as they did during the war, of course. And then they've got another memorial on there as well, that you walk through a section of the ship, and they've got all the different wars that American sailors have been in. But by far the best museum that surprised me, didn't expect it, wasn't anticipating it was going to be as good as it was the Royal Navy in the UK have a museum at their actual airfield. And I thought, oh yeah, this will, I was thinking like the Australian one, now it'll have a few planes, we'll probably be a couple of hours and we'll be out the door. And that'll be that. And no, it was extremely impressive. In fact, I would say I preferred it over the RAF's museum. Fantastic exhibit, some beautiful aircraft there, and some quite rare aircraft too. But the thing I really was impressed by was they actually, when HMS, what was the ship? Invincible, I think it was taken out of service. It was their last aircraft carrier, the last aircraft carrier that could take non-V-stop, so like you had Phantoms on it and stuff like that. When that came out of service, it was actually the one we were supposed to buy before the Falkland War came along, and the Australian government agreed not to buy it so that it could stay in the Royal Navy service for the Falkland War. Anyway, it was there, and they've got some just fantastic. I just want to see where that fits. I think it fits there. A little bit fiddly. Supposed to fit in. There we go. I probably should use a slower glue. I think we got it. Yeah, so they had that there, and what they'd done before they decommissioned her, or after they decommissioned her, I should say, is before they scrapped her, is they actually took a whole heap of the bridge, the flight deck, all different sort of parts of the ship. They actually took them out of the ship. They cut them out of the ship, and then they reassembled them at this museum. And you actually walk around on the flight deck, and you walk up into the coning to a sort of tower and see the operations stuff. And they've got all the machines there, all the original radar equipment and bits and pieces. And so it's like a time capsule. You're seeing how that ship looked in its final year of service, which was in the late 1980s, I think it was. And with what was then pretty state of the art, which by today's standards looks frankly pretty old school, but really good. And they had a laser sort of holographic sort of thing going, where they'd have members of the Navy today who are actually on the Queen Elizabeth, and I think the Prince Charles is the name of the other one, the two carriers they've got now, and they actually would say, my role on the new ship is X, Y, Z, and this role you're looking at now is how we used to do it. This is my job back in the day, or this job used to be 3 people, now it's 1, and that sort of thing. And they had one of my favourite aircraft of all time. I'm a huge fan of the Phantom, and I love the Rolls-Royce powered Phantoms, and I particularly love the original dark grey, almost blue colour Royal Navy Phantoms. And I walked out on the flight deck that they had there simulating a takeoff of a launch, and it was the Phantom in the original blue, with its undercarriage propped down. The Phantoms, the UK Phantoms, had a massive front wheel landing gear to push them up at extreme angles, because they needed to vector the exhaust down, and they had much bigger Rolls-Royce engines in them. So they were a much bulkier looking Phantom. And you particularly notice that when you're standing next to one. So this thing's all paused to take off from the carrier deck, and it just looked magnificent. Absolutely magnificent. And then we got chatting with the next Royal Navy guy there, who was telling us about his role. He used to fly helicopters, and that was really interesting as well. But it was just a really nicely laid out museum. Some beautiful World War I aircraft as well. A beautiful section going through the history of the women in the Navy So going right from the early days when they were just part of the auxiliary through to their, it wasn't that long ago really, I think it was the 1990s, 2000, around that time when they actually were able to serve on the ships in any role. And so there was a nice tribute there to their service in World War II and World War One in Korea. There was just, and it was just really nicely laid out. And one thing the British do with their jets and their planes, which I really appreciated, particularly with the ones that were in the Gulf War and the Falklands War, which I thought was really nice. They don't paint them. So when they go to the museum, they don't touch them up and make them look pretty. They put them in the museum exactly how they looked when they went out of service. So they've got marks on them, they've got touch up on them, they've got stains all over them and dirt and grime. And so you get, particularly when you see the ones that were in the Middle East that were flying for the Iraq 1 and 2 and that kind of stuff, they're just hammered. I mean, you know, and there's a helicopter in the Navy one that's got bullet holes all through it from Falklands. It's got like 40 bullet holes in it. So, you know, you see all that sort of stuff, and I think it makes it just makes it a lot more real, I think, when you see the planes like that. All right. What else are we going to do? Okay, so I think that's not bad for sub-assemblies. Anything I'm going to do now is I'll cut these pieces out so I can paint them, and these parts here as well. I might attach that to the seat as well, the seat side, and then I'll put those out and we can paint them. Now I'm going to go ahead and paint all this with some lacquer primer, I think. Yeah, I think we'll do that, and then we can sort of look at painting the detail pieces and the cockpit colours and all that sort of stuff. Alright, so the last bit I need is those seat parts. 62. I hope I'm looking at the right sprue here. What am I looking for? See something. C39. You're probably looking at this and, oh, there it is. So you're probably screaming at me in the camera because you can see it and I can't. I've just got a new spray booth, so that's another thing would be cool to show you. Went to HMAS Belfast, was in the UK. Oh yes, yeah, that was awesome. I was lucky enough to get on that, and the Victory. Oh, wasn't the Victory just amazing? I mean, I went on both those two. Yeah, the Belfast was great to see. What a tiny ship as far as like the compartments and stuff was, and the amount of changes that had happened over the years where they just sort of reconfigured it to keep it current. But the Victory, man, that's just amazing. Talk about going back in time. And yeah, that was just awesome. Really enjoyed both those ships, but I thought the Victory was just, yeah, there's nowhere else in the world you're going to see a ship like that, really. And that she still can't sail, but she's still actually on the books. To where we were, I don't know if you were there when they had them, but just where the Victory's in dry dock, just down from that is actually where the two new aircraft carriers were. See, the Elizabeth and the King Charles. They were both, Prince Charles, sorry. They were both docked, and the Elizabeth was getting ready to go to sea, I think. So she had some of her engines running, and the whole area around there was just shaking. Like the dock was just quietly sort of vibrating from the amazing amount of, God knows how big those engines are. They're really impressive ships when you're standing close to them. I'll tell you that. I don't think I'd want to take one on. I think the British ones look far more intimidating than the American ones, to be honest, and much more modern looking. And then I thought, I was just sitting there watching it, and I thought, this is amazing. And then there was some activity going on because they're obviously getting ready to go to sea, and then they fired up some more engines. I thought they had them all going. They didn't. So this big smoke cloud billow came out, and then the whole dock just started vibrating. It was pretty impressive. And I thought it's pretty cool that those guys go out to sea when those aircraft carriers, and where they're based, they get to see the victory. So I thought it was pretty cool. So you've kind of got the state of the art, top of the range, sort of the best of the Royal Navy was the victory, and then next to it, effectively, is the latest and greatest of the Royal Navy with those two aircraft carriers, which is pretty impressive. I think if you're a sailor, you couldn't help but look across and think you're pretty lucky to be sailing on them. They're quite impressive vessels. So what I'm looking for here, could I add those? Actually, I've just realised I can probably add the rudder pedals and the yoke to that piece as well, to save a bit of time. I'll do that in a sec. I'm getting distracted here. I'll go back to what I was doing with the seat. So C11 and C10. These are very delicate parts, so I'm trying. I may sand a bit of these a bit more once it's all glued together, I think. We'll see. I'm just really conscious. I've done this before with Airfix kits where I've sanded parts a little too zealously and end up removing bits that I shouldn't have. So I'm very careful about not trying to do that now. So far the mold's pretty sharp, which is helping, so I can see what I'm doing. It's okay, so that's the seat. Going back to this guy, I reckon we can glue some more parts on it. So I'm going to look for what am I looking for? C32 and 33, which are the rudder pedals. Maybe around here somewhere. Why can't I see them? There they are. Thanks, Jim, mate. Thanks for dropping in and saying good day. Appreciate that. And yeah, if you get a chance during the weekend, pop in and say good day. Good to catch up with you and meet you. And yeah, the videos will be up so you can catch up with them later if you want. Thanks, mate. Okay. These parts are really small and only got a very small contact spot, so I'm going to use some of this MIG glue on these. Once they're glued, I want them to stay there, not move if I can avoid it. The rudder pedals are a bit overscale, but I get it. You couldn't really do these in scale and still make them able to be done in plastic, and they would also be very hard to work with. So this is a fair compromise. At least I've got something there. This is still light years ahead of the Spitfire kits that we had to choose from in the 90s, which is probably the last time I built a Spitfire kit, to be honest. Ah! I'm going to have the rudder pedals fairly even because I'll have the rudder on the back just squared off because it's easier to mask it and paint it and stuff. Sometimes if I'm feeling adventurous, I'll put the rudder at a bit of an angle. Sometimes they would do that, particularly if there was a bit of a breeze going. Most models tend to make planes with all the control surfaces level. Not always authentic. Sometimes it is. Depends on the scenario. It's close enough. Don't think you'll notice the difference. And now I've got two more parts to go, which is the control yoke, which is actually in two parts, which is a bit scary for a kit this scale. Anyway, C78. 78 is. I'm missing something. Where is it? 78, is that right? Oh, no, sorry, 24. Right. Very delicate parts we're working with here now. And control yoke is on a different sprue. D, there it is, D2. Very nicely moulded, but very delicate. So hopefully the glue was going to hold these. Okay. It's very delicate, as you can see. I'm just putting a little bit of glue on the end there. This stuff's really strong glue, so once you get it in place, it won't fall off, but you can only get one crack at it. He says, because he does it wrong. It's a really nicely detailed control column for this scale, I have to say. I'll put it at a slight angle, but yeah, that's pretty nice. Okay. Alright, so I think we're about ready for painting. Alright. Yeah, for time. Yeah, not too bad. Okay, so the paint I'm going to use is this one. This is the AK Grey Primer and Microfiller. What I'll do now is switch cameras, and hopefully with the miracle technology you will see my spray booth. Just give me a sec to turn the other camera on. It probably will work better with the battery in it. Put one of those in. Okay. Switch across to the camera. Let's change the angle a bit so you can see what I'm looking at. So this is my new spray booth. I wonder if I can change the angle a bit for you so you can see the detail of it. Actually, I might. I'll switch the other view for just a second. What I'm going to do is just lower this camera down a bit for you so you can see what I can see. Okay, that might work. Let's switch back. Okay, so if I change angle now, you can see it now. There you go. So this was a new spray booth. I only got this last week, and I love this thing. If you're going to get a spray booth, you need to check these out. I saw these in Japan, and I really wanted one, but I couldn't figure out how I was going to get one home. And then I found Hearn's Hobby in Melbourne had one of these, and that thing you can see there with the hose is a water curtain. So it actually puts a sheet of water down at the front, which really helps with grabbing the paint particles and stuff like that, and it reduces the amount of smell in the place dramatically. This room I'm working in is actually in my house, so when you're working with these lacquer paints which are quite smelly, it works really well. And it still has a fan behind it as well, which you'll see in a sec when I start this thing up. So I'll just put the parts across that we're going to be working on. Now for these smaller pieces, which are very delicate, as you can see, I have to have some way of holding them while I'm painting them. So everyone's got their own way of doing this. And I'll show you what I do. Let me just move that camera a bit again so you can see the parts. There we go. So first things first, I use this, which is called Mr. Paint Station. So it's like a bit of cardboard with these holes in it. I think you can even get some kind of air conditioning or insulation or something that's sort of shaped like that if you don't want to go and buy something specific. And then I use toothpicks. And the last bit of the puzzle, if I can find it, is this, which is blue tack. And I look for a part that you won't see when the model's assembled. So like for example, the back of the instrument panel is not something you're going to see. So I just go ahead and put a bit of blue tack on my toothpick and then put that on the piece that you're not going to see, and hey presto, I've got a way of holding the part while I'm painting. And then when I'm done, I can pop it in there and leave it there to dry, and I also know where it is when I come back later. So that's what I'm going to do with some of these parts. I'm not sure whether you're going to see both sides of this one. So in the cases where I'm not sure, I'll show you another way I do things. But let me just finish off with the toothpicks where I can. So another spot I really like to do is the bottom of the seat, because when the model's glued together you're not going to see the bottom. So it works well as another place to hold it. This one's a bit more tricky. These are the seat front, or these seat sides actually. So you are going to see those within reason. Yeah, you're going to mostly see those. So I'm going to try a different approach to do those. So for those guys, what we're going to do, let me just move that out of the way. Move him up there for a minute. Is I've got a piece of cardboard. Put it up there, you can see I've used it a few times. And then what I do is just get some tape. This is just painter's tape you can get from the hardware store. I just like this stuff because it's fairly easy to tear and it's got a nice sticky finish. So I'm just doubling it over here. And then what I'll do is just stick it on like so. And because we're using lacquer paint will dry within a minute or two. I can then take it off that backing, flip it over, and then paint the other side. And that solves the problem of wanting to paint both sides, but having really small, very delicate parts that I'm trying to do it with. I'm going to do a variation of that for the control column and rotor pedals as well, as soon as I get this part stuck down. So, and on there, and we'll put that on there, like so. Now we've got all the parts ready to go. Next up, our primer. This primer doesn't have to be thinned. I do typically put a little bit of thinner with it when I first get it, but I think this should be okay. For spraying, I'm going to be using, what am I going to use? Not that one. I'll use this one. I'm using this airbrush, which is a 0.3 needle, some dual action, which needs a proper clean, and I haven't done that, which is a bit slack of me. I should have done that this morning. So I might have to clean the needle before I use it. Like I said, this is real time, so you're getting to see everything in real time. Normally in the video I'd have this all edited out so you think that I'm doing amazing work, and it all works the first time. At least that's what I'm hoping you're thinking. But obviously, behind the scenes, I'm doing stuff like this. But anyway, I kind of feel good about this. It's kind of like, forgive me for my sins. Alright, so it's working now. Just had a little bit of paint left on the needle. I had to clear off. Yeah, so this is, for those who are into the brands, this is a Krios, a Mr. Hobby, basically, airbrush. It's made in the same factory as the Iwata airbrushes, so if you know Iwata, it will look familiar. Not exactly the same, but a lot of the parts are in fact interchangeable. So this actually has an Iwata CS needle in it at the moment, as well as an Iwata CS nozzle. And that's just because I needed to replace it because I damaged the other one when I accidentally dropped this thing. I've got a compressor off camera. I guess why not? Look, I'm showing you everything else. I might as well keep going. A lot of people have a compressor with a little air tank underneath them. They're very popular on eBay and places like that, pretty cheap. Nothing wrong with them. I had one of those for years, but I got sick. Oops, I just dropped the airbrush. I got sick of having to constantly empty the air tank on them because you are supposed to do that when you're not using them. So what I've replaced it with, I don't know if you can see it there. I think it's just in camera now. Yeah, it's just in camera now. This is the dual motor. So this has got the same sort of compressor as you would have on top of your standard sort of compressor with a tank. But I don't have a tank, so these dual motors just give me a more, they work together and they just give me a little bit more of a continuous airflow, so I don't get what's called pulsing. And the actual hose that I'm using, which came with the compressor, if I get my mask out of the way, as you can see, it's coiled. So effectively, that's where the air gets stored, so that you get a smoother airflow coming out. The upshot of all this, geez, I'm doing well. I'm dropping things everywhere. The upshot of this is that actually ends up giving me a nice smooth airflow. Though I can't tell the difference between that and a compressor with a full tank. So I actually quite prefer that one because I don't have to empty it. I just have to do the release there on the valve when I'm done and get the air out of that, and we're good to go. And it takes very little time to fill it up as well. So just to show you, let's just turn this on. It'll be a bit noisy. There you go. So we just filled up the hose, and that's sitting on at the moment about 40 psi, which is way too strong for spray painting this paint. So I will be turning it down probably to about 15 to 20, somewhere around that. but I have it up that high when I'm cleaning the airbrush, just to make sure I get everything out of the airbrush. So I'll just adjust my valve down a bit. You'll notice I'm adjusting the valve while I'm holding down the trigger. That's because I want the air pressure not to be what it is when it's turned off. I want the air pressure to be set to what it'll be when I'm spraying. That's why I'm doing that. Okay, let's reposition our camera because it's right in my way at the moment. So I'm just going to have to move the camera a little bit. And I've got a light in the way as well. How did I manage that? I'm not sure. There we go. Move it up there, out of the way. 1, 2, 3. Okay. What the heck is that? Oh, it's the charging cable. Alright. Work with me in camera. So this is the stuff you have to deal with if you're doing YouTube. You thought it was easy. Alright, let's try that angle. And zoom in a bit. There we go. And then we're going to have to try and fix it in place. You might have to bear with me a second. I'm going to have to move a couple of things on the camera here so it works. Otherwise it gets in my way when I'm spraying and I can't see what I'm doing. Come on, get up there. There you go. Okay. There we go for angles. That's not too bad. I think we can work with that. So I'll go ahead and start up the noise you can hear is the water curtain. It's just awesome. It's just such a cool thing. So basically that's running some water now. You can just see it in the frame. If I point there, you can see the water just coming down. And that'll capture any of the spray that I don't direct onto the model itself, which is really cool. If you're using lacquer paints, you should probably think about using a respirator. I normally do use one. You can get these from automotive spray paint sort of places, or you can get them from suppliers, or you can get them from hardware stores. This is a 3-in-1, so it's a good quality one. That will protect you from any of the particles. That's particularly important if you're using lacquer paints. You can use it with acrylic as well, and I do. I don't know if it's quite as critical, although I'd still recommend you wear one. For this particular build, I'm going to be a bit naughty and not use it, so I'm going to turn the fan on my what am I trying to say here? Sorry, I'm getting tired now. It's getting towards the end of the night. On my spray booth. There we go. I knew that had a name. And I think the other thing I'll do is I'm just going to fix those paints down so they're easier to work with. Okay. When it comes to lacquer paints, I tend to spray them at fairly low pressure, and I also typically spray them quite thin, more thin than I've seen other modelers do. Personal preference, I rather sort of build up the paint. Other modelers just prefer to put one coat on and have it basically cover everything. So the only time you're going to see me using a lacquer where I just basically put one coat on and it covers everything is going to be when I'm applying the primer. I won't be surprised tomorrow if you see me applying the final colours that you see me applying it multiple times. Now part of that so I don't obscure detail and I can see what I'm doing. Another reason I do it that way is sometimes I like to vary the paint I'm putting on to give it almost like a weathered finish. And it's just easy to do that. And the final reason I guess is because I'm cheap and it uses less paint that way. If I do it that way, I'm sort of managing my paint a lot more carefully. Okay, so I'm just going to put the fan on now, so you're going to hear a lot of noise. And we're going to go ahead and just do a test spray. Looks good. And we'll go ahead and paint these parts first. A little bit too much air pressure, so I'm drop it down just a bit. Okay, so I've had a bit of a mistake straight off the bat, and if you can see there's actually water. So I've actually got water in the paint, in the line for the airbrush. Because I'm spraying lacquer, that is not going to be a problem. This stuff sprays really nicely, as you can tell. And we're done. So I'm just going to repeat that for the next one. And I might just stop for a second and just take that. What I'm doing off camera is I'm just releasing there's a water moisture trap. So I'm just letting some air out of that and get rid of any water that's built up. This AK primer is actually really nice. I've actually got several bottles of it. I don't use it a lot because I prefer the acrylics. But there are times when either I'm in a hurry, like now, or I'm working with car kits, would you believe? The plastics they use in car kits for some reason, and in some of the science fiction models too, is very brittle type plastic, and it does not work well with the polyurethane acrylic primers. So I tend to use lacquer for those. Oop. I'm about to go sailing. Lacquers have another advantage, which is they're quite forgiving. Honestly, it's a lot harder to paint lacquer paints badly than acrylics. And acrylics tend to go on very wet, so it's hard to see what they're going to look like because you've got to wait till they dry. Unless you're really experienced with that particular oops, I put a bit too close to the water curtain. Unless you're very experienced with the paint. With lacquer paints, I won't say they're idiot proof, but honestly, they're pretty close. So if you don't like the hassle of having to mix paints exactly right and all that kind of thing, I think these are actually easy to work with. As I said, the main, oh goodness sake, I'm doing well. The main challenge, I'm tired, you can tell. The main challenge is that they are more toxic. So you just have to have a bit more respect with how you handle them. And that's particularly true if you're going to be having kids using these paints. You want to make sure you've got all the right gear for them. And if you don't, you're just going to have it and you're going to paint the model on the kitchen table like many of us did, then just get the acrylic paints. If you go to any hobby store and you tell them that you just want the safest paint for the kids, you just want to use acrylic paints, they'll point you to the brands that they have. There's plenty of brands out there, and you can brush paint them, but they're just a bit safer if you're worried about things like that, for yourself or for someone else that might be using them. Okay, let's get this finished. That in frame so you can see what I'm doing. So I've just stuck it on a pair of pliers here, basically. I don't know what the correct term is for these. Handy. There we go. These have dried enough. So I'm trying to see I'm still in frame. There we go. This is dried enough, so I can just flip that over. and have a go at painting the other side. And what else am I going to do? Oh, sleep frames. But this is definitely the advantage of Lucky. You can see how quick I'm able to work. No problem at all. Righto, that's those parts done. Gotta remember to do these ones. Let the seat here. Provided you don't go crazy with the air pressure, that little bit of blue tack is enough to hold it. Right. So I think before I call it a night, I'm going to actually put the green, which is the aircraft interior colour, on these parts and let them dry overnight with that on them. So for the next few minutes, I'm going to just empty the paint out of my airbrush and clean it enough to be able to put the next coat on. Anyway, at least you've seen the AK lack of primer there, and you can see it's pretty good. I usually thin it just a little bit more than what it comes with out of the bottle. I put a bit of thinner on the top of the bottle when I first get one. The other thing in its favour is it lasts a long time. Some of the acrylic primers actually will start to deteriorate over time once you've opened them up. Particularly if you put the primers anywhere where they're exposed to sunlight. There's a little tip there for you. If you want your acrylic paints to last a bit longer, particularly the primers, don't leave them in sunlight. Don't leave them near the window. Don't put them anywhere near direct sunlight. Put them ideally in a cupboard or in a box or something so there's no sunlight on them at all when you're not using them, and you will find they will last better. So obviously just getting warm or being exposed to the sun does seem to start some sort of chemical process with them, and they won't necessarily not work, but they just aren't as good as what they were when you first opened the bottle. And Vallejo is probably one brand that's a bit susceptible to that, but trust me, they're not on their own. I have that problem with a number of brands, so I've just found from experience that seems to help to keep them out of sunlight. The other thing that affects acrylic paints a lot, some brands more susceptible than others, is variations of temperature. So for example, in Australia, depending where you live, you have really hot weather, and then like where we are in Tassie, you have cold weather, and cold weather particularly will set them off. They actually start to go off. So it's not a good idea to store your acrylic paints somewhere where you get extreme temperatures, like in your garage, places like that. So you should probably, in my opinion, keep them in a container that's reasonably airtight so you don't have to deal with the smell, and put them somewhere like in a cupboard so that they're in direct sunlight, and ideally in your house, because even if your house is air conditioned, you're still not going to have as extreme a temperature range as you would if you put it in something like an outside garage or something like that. And if your house is air conditioned most of the time when the weather's really hot or really cold outside, it'll be better. Okay, so my airbrush is clean enough now for me to do the next colour. Let's have a talk about the paint we're going to be using for that. So I'm going to switch back to the workbench and just do a quick tidy up. Just don't need to see all that. And let's talk about the Hataka paint we're going to be using. Once I find it. Okay, so this is the paint we're going to be using. This is interior grey green, which is your sort of standard green that was used on RAF planes at the time. As you can see, the paint is separated, so we can't use it like it is now. So you get the joy of hearing this. I'm leaving the fan going, by the way, because if there is any vapours getting around, it will just help clear that out of the room. Since this is in the house, when I finish up tonight, my son sleeps in the room next door, so I don't really want him having to deal with the smells. Okay, so we just strap it in like that. Just go out a bit. There we go. You can see what it is. I've strapped it in, nice and tight. Oh, there's one more thing I was going to check. You can probably hear that noise. I put a ball bearing in the paints. I'm just checking it's got one. They don't come with a ball bearing, but I find that helps with the mixing of the paint. There we go. Another fun noise. Okay, so you can see the paint starting to mix up pretty well. Now these are actually quite a nice paint once you mix them up, and they're quite vibrant too, which I actually like. They pop a bit for military colours. Don't know what they've done, but the formula, but I've noticed that with the acrylic ones as well. Just turn that fan off for a sec. Okay. Now we're going to do the mixing, and I'm looking around for what I need, so give me a sec. Now, some talented modelers mix their paints in the airbrush. I'm not one of those people. I like to mix my paints in a little disposable medicine cup like you get for your cough syrups and things. You can buy those on eBay really cheap, or if you've got a medical supply place near where you live, you can get them even cheaper. And here's my paint. So I'm going to just we'll try 10 drops. Let's see how we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And you can see it's really nice. It's a nice colour. Looks good. I'll add another 10. 1, 2, 3. Now, why am I counting? These days I don't often count at all. I'm doing it for you guys, in case you're curious what the mix is. As you get a bit more experienced, you worry. I know when you get in the hobby, because I was like this, you get obsessed with how much should I thin things, and often people say 50-50, and my answer is it actually is not like that. It kind of depends. And I know that that's really helpful advice when you're starting out, just saying it depends. So I will try and explain what I'm doing as I go through. So I've just got a little stick here, which these are actually paint mixes, sticks of some sort. I can't remember where I got them from, the Japanese. And I've got some lacquer thinner here. This is Tamir's lacquer thinner. A lot of people like the Mr. Hobby's lacquer thinner, which is like it's got a retarder in it, and that's really nice stuff too. The retarder slows down the paint drying, so one of the reasons that it's popular is because it effectively gives the paint more time to dry, which means it kind of levels itself out more, so you get a smoother finish. So it's easier to get a nice smooth finish with that particular lacquer thinner. The Ataka paints will work with that. They'll work with standard lacquer thinners as well. They'll work with real colour lacquer thinners. What you don't want to be using is the lacquer thinner you buy from the hardware store, because that stuff is just way too strong. And there are probably one or two brands you could use when you've got a bit more experience and you could figure it out, trial and error kind of thing, what brands in your local supplier. But if you don't want to go through that grief, just buy any of the major reputable brands. They're going to work, no problem. So what we're going to do to get started, I'll just put 10 drops in. I think that's 10, close enough. You'll probably tell me in the video that's not right. I can't count, I'm too tired. So I'm just going to stir that paint together. And there's a couple of reasons I'm doing this in the medicine cup. First of all, if there was a compatibility problem between the thinner and the paint, I'm finding out in the medicine cup and not inside my airbrush, because if you get it wrong in your airbrush, it's a bugger to clean it out. So that's one reason. And the second reason, I can just see how the paint's behaving. And that's behaving pretty well. But I'm going to put a little bit more thinner in. And you'll see what I was doing. So I should explain what I was doing there too. I was stirring the paint up and then I was running it up the side of the cup. And what I'm seeing is, first of all, how opaque it is and how long it takes for the paint to run back down and pull at the bottom. Now, the thickness it is now honestly would work, and probably 90% of modelers would stick with something like this. So this is basically a 20 drops paint, 10 drops thinner. But as I said to you at the beginning, I prefer my paint to be a bit thinner than that. So I'm actually going to add more thinner. Again, personal preference. You certainly don't have to make it as thin as I do. Okay, we'll try with that. You can see if I just run it around there, you can see it's quite thin. And of course, people tell you to thin it as much as skim milk or something. I don't know what skim milk's supposed to look like. I still don't know. But that's what it looks like to me when I do my lacquer paint. So hopefully it makes some sense. So what we're going to do now is switch back to our spray booth, and then what I'm going to do is paint all the parts that we've primed in this colour. And then when I've done all those, I'm going to let them dry, and then we can do the detail painting and whatever. I actually think I might need a bit more of this too. So I'll just add another 10 drops. I'll add a bit more thinners. I'll give you another tip too, actually, particularly true if you're doing acrylic paints and you're spray painting acrylic paints. Once you've mixed them, and we might talk about that later with flow improvers and things, but anyway, if you're just getting a basic start and you're just mixing your paints up, don't just throw them straight in the airbrush. Actually let them sit for a minute or two before you actually start spraying. And the reason for that is you give the thinners a chance to really bite into the pigment and the formula and actually mix itself into it very well. That is that will improve your acrylic painting, in my experience anyway. Okay, because we're using lacquer thinners, lacquer paints, and these paints are quite thin, I don't want to be blasting it onto the model, because if I do, it's just going to pull like water, and we will end up with a very unfortunate paint finish. We'll be able to fix it, but it'll be a pain. So what I'm going to do now, before I put that paint in, is I'm looking at my air pressure gauge and I'm just dialing it down. And again, in real life, I probably do this with feel these days as much as looking at the gauge. But I know one of you is going to ask me or be curious about what the air pressure is. So I think it's probably around 13 to 15 psi. Alright, so I've got a little bit in the cup. You notice I didn't put it all in. There's a reason for that. If that ends up being a mistake, and I have to remix the paint because I've got the formula wrong, it's too thin or it's too thick, I don't have as much to pour out. And I can start again. Alright, let's switch cameras. And we're back here. I think I'll leave the fan off just for a couple of minutes and I'll turn it back on after we start doing this. I'm just going to check before we start on the model. I've just got a bit of paper towel here. I'm going to get that in frame. I'm just making sure that it's spraying okay and I've got the colour coming through. There's no thinner. Because I did clean up this airbrush, so I don't want to spray the thinner straight onto my nicely primed model. And now, and you don't have to get it all done in one coat. That's the other thing I want to say here. It's okay just to make it opaque. And you notice I'm moving around, trying different angles. And just give the paint a moment to adhere to the parts, and if you haven't got the coverage where you want it to be, go over it again. Don't feel you have to get it all done in one go. In fact, it's better, I think, if you don't do it in one go necessarily, if your goal is to get a nice smooth finish. And one that will dry quick as well, because we're not putting excess paint onto the surfaces. So I've got to do the top of the yoke there, obviously where I'm holding it, but we'll come back to that. Let's have a look at put that aside for a sec. Let's have a look at these side walls because they should come up well on the camera. Again, not complete coverage. That's fine. I'm going to give that a minute just to, so you can see it there. I'm just going to give it a minute to dry, and I'll do the next one. The other thing to note is that I do know that the side where the oxygen tanks is going to be aluminium. And I know it's going to be the same here on this side. So I don't really need to get too much green on that side. But I do need to make sure, oops, I do need to make sure I've got enough on the other side. So in fact I could probably hold that. This is a nice acrylic paint. I think probably my favourite one in the lacquers is Mr. Colour. To me, lacquers are really nice too. I like them. AK make real colour. They're not bad. They're a little bit too matte finish for me. It's a personal preference thing. There's nothing wrong with the paint itself. And these Atakas are nice too. They're a bit hard to get. But I certainly have no problem using them. Okay, let's move on and do some other parts. So I think we'll do, so let's see if we can get them in camera for you. There we go. These seat sides. So if you remember, I've thinned these down probably close to 2/3 thinner, and you can see the colour's still there. The pigment on the Hataka paints is pretty good, so as a result, it doesn't really mind if you thin them down that much. I found the same with the other brands I was just talking about. You try and thin a acrylic paint like that, and you're probably asking for trouble, to be honest, because there'll be too much thinners. But you can get away with it with lacquer. And it's really nice how it's how the cockpit's showing up. It looks really good. And I know I'm just aware I'm out of camera here. Let me just twist that around a bit. it's a bit hard to get everything in shot. When you're shooting YouTube videos, you spend a bit of time setting everything up. Nice thin coats. I'm not saturating the surface, as you can see. It should dry very quickly if you've just got enough paint on, which is what you want. Okay, that looks pretty good. I'm running a bit low on paint, so I'm just going to fill up my airbrush a bit more. Okay, we should have that in view, yep. I'm going to have to look up whether the instrument panel is black or green. I'm not sure, so just for now I'll do it green. I'm pretty sure it's black, but it won't hurt. Okay. If you recall, I started with this piece and I had to do the control yoke. I'll just reposition my tweezers. Oops, one of my rudder pedals is falling off. I'll fix that in the morning with some super glue. You probably noticed at some point, I think I took it out of frame. If I'm spraying really big parts, I wear these disposable neoprene gloves, just so I don't get paint all over my hands, because we're doing very small parts here and I'm not spraying madly paint everywhere. I'm not worrying about it. All I know is that no matter how hard I try, I end up getting paint on myself anyway. Okay, inside of the seat frames. Done. And the other part I had to do? No, this one. I'll do that. You know what I should have done? I should have painted the inside of the fuselage of the plane. I didn't think of that. It's a bit silly. Yes, I should have done that. That would have saved some time. Yeah, we might do that tonight as well before I go to bed. Just so I don't have to do it later. You can spray lacquer paints directly onto the model without a primer. And some modelers do that without a thought. I prefer a primer. It's just, I don't know why. I just probably because I've come from the acrylic paints where it's more important, but I just like having a consistent colour before I start because it just picks out any faults or anything that I really need to pay attention to. Looking at this kit, let me just switch you back to the main workbench for a sec. I'll look here at the cockpit sides. They're not too bad, they're a little bit. If you have a look in here, there's some ejection pin marks. We've got one up here and we've got some along here. These ones aren't going to be visible because this is where the part we're doing at the moment, the interior detail part, will sit. That would be visible, but because it's a very tiny cockpit and it's at the back of all these other parts, I strongly suspect you won't see it. So for that reason, I don't really need to spend any time cleaning these up. I'll just sand these very lightly just so that the part I'm putting in here fits nicely. And we should get away with it. I'm kind of the person that in normal circumstances I would sand that out because it would bug me. But given the time constraints, I'm not going to do that because I think that's probably overkill for this build. And of course this build is a great reminder that you don't have to be quite as fussy as I typically am. I think I still end up with a reasonable model. That's just me. But because I want to put the aluminium on tonight, it just makes sense to do those interiors as well. Now if I put the green and the aluminium straight on that, it probably will work. The catch is that your primer colour can influence just a little bit the final shade of the colour you put over it. So that will bug me. So I am going to put grey primer on these first and then put the colour over them just to be on the safe side. Fortunately, because I've got more money than sense, I have more than one airbrush, so I don't have to clean out that airbrush that's got our final cockpit colour in order to apply this primer. So that's a good thing. That would have got me emotional because I had to muck around a bit more. So what I'm going to do before we start is I'm just going to give those just a slight. Oh, that one's pretty prominent actually. Probably maybe I should have done this. I'm going to notice it now. I'm not really trying to get rid of them so much as I'm just trying to smooth them out so that the part that we're going to add in later will glue in nicely and seamlessly into that spot. It doesn't have to be perfect. Anyway, this will be a good example to show you of how quickly lacquer paints can be painted over. It's kind of scary how quick you can do it. Alright. So what I'm going to do with these is I'm going to put the grey primer on next. Okay, so we're back on the spray booth. I'm going to have to change airbrushes here because I said I don't want to have to clean out the other one. So I'm just having a look to see what I've got. We'll go with Old Faithful, which is my White CS. Oh geez, I should clean these brushes better. This one's stuck as well. It says something about how well I clean my airbrushes. Oh, no, this is not a white. What's this one? This is, oh, that Gar, what is it called, Garland or something. It's, they're Taiwanese or Chinese? I think they're Taiwanese. They're not a bad airbrush. They're not spectacular, but they're not a bad airbrush. I think they're a little overpriced, to be honest, for what they are. But if you get them on sale, which is what I did, they're not too bad. And unlike a lot of the cheaper airbrushes out there, they do sell spare parts, which is really important because inevitably at some point you're going to wear out a part or break a part or lose a bit, particularly when you're starting out. just adjusting it now. And then we'll put some primer in it, a grey primer. The reasons I don't like this airbrush though, it's a bit harder to clean. This is one of its complaints, but anyway. Alright, so it's good to go. You can see what I'm doing. Here we go. This is a 0.35, I think, needle. Lovely, that's it. Okay, we'll clean that after I've turned off the stream, so you don't have to be bored waiting for me to do that. Now I've just painted those, as you know. I'm now switching across to my other airbrush that's got the green. Just turned on the air pressure a bit. And I am going to put a lid on my primer, because if I've learned anything in this hobby, is if you leave paint with a lid off, you will knock it over. Okay, so let's go back to the part I started with, which is this one here. I have a feeling that bit back there is aluminium, but I could be wrong. Because I haven't got time right now to go and look it up. I'm just going to paint it green for now. I can always go back over it and paint it silver. So we just lost the camera. Again, joys of live streaming. Something you would not see when I'm doing YouTube videos normally is I swap batteries out. Okay, so I'll just put a new battery in. There you go, you're back in. Zoom back in a bit. Let's just finish off that green. I think I've got a little bit of green left. The airbrush has just run out. I've got about 3 drops left. That should be enough. Alright guys, well that's a pretty good effort for tonight, I think. So you've seen me paint all the parts, you've seen me do some sub-assemblies. Tomorrow when we come back, I'll do a little bit of research to see what the colours should be for the aluminium. We'll apply that to the model. We might also do a little bit of post shading, just to, nothing too fancy, just a little bit just to make the interior pop a little bit more. And then we can keep moving forward with it and hopefully start putting the cockpit together. Thanks so much for watching this video. I know it's a really long video when you stream them because you're watching every single thing I do, but hopefully I've explained things as I go along, and that might be at least vaguely interesting. You can let me know in the comments if you want, or you can tell me it's the worst thing you've ever watched. I don't know. I'm just trying to do this the first time, and hopefully it's working for people. So in the next video, I'll catch up with you and we'll keep working on the cockpit. Till then, thanks for watching.